I was monitoring the Plaza cameras when the concrete barrier buckled. I saw a scene that belonged in a horror movie. A 1,200-pound Kodiak bear was barreling toward the fountain where families were eating lunch. Welcome to Mr. Brian's Tale, where every story takes you on an unforgettable journey. Whether it's thrilling adventures, heartwarming moments, or tales that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, this is your destination for captivating storytelling. If you love getting lost in exciting narratives and discovering new worlds with every video, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss out on the next amazing tale. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The monitors in the security hub were usually a mosaic of mundane human behavior, children tugging at sleeves, tourists fumbling with maps, and the rhythmic spray of the central fountain. But the moment the structural sensors in the Kodiak habitat flatlined, the screens transformed into a nightmare. I watched through the lens of camera 4 as the reinforced concrete barrier, compromised by the morning's subtle tremor, finally gave way with a silent, sickening buckle. A cloud of gray dust erupted, and out of the debris emerged Kodiak, a 1,200-pound mountain of fur and muscle, catapulting himself into the zoo's crowded central plaza. The reaction was instantaneous and primal. A high-decibel siren began to wail, its mechanical shriek designed to pierce through any crowd, signaling an immediate code red. On the screen, the plaza became a sea of frantic motion. I saw mothers scoop up toddlers with a strength born of terror, and fathers abandon strollers to shove their families toward the heavy oak doors of the gift shop. The audio feed from the plaza was a cacophony of screeching tires, crashing trays from the nearby cafe, and the raw, guttural screams of hundreds of people realizing they were no longer at the top of the food chain. My hands shook as I gripped the console, my eyes darting between the monitors to coordinate the evacuation. Plaza clear in 60 seconds. I barked into the radio, but as the crowd thinned and the dust began to settle, my heart stopped. In the very center of the plaza, standing near the edge of the fountain, was a lone figure. It was Zara Patel. She was 11 years old, and her back was turned to the approaching beast. She wasn't moving. She wasn't screaming. While the world around her descended into a frantic, noisy hell, Zara remained perfectly still, her attention fixed on a monarch butterfly that had landed on the rim of a nearby planter. To anyone else, she looked defiant, but I knew the truth. Zara was deaf. The sirens that were currently vibrating the very glass of my security booth were, to her, nothing more than a faint hum if she felt them at all. The screams of the crowd were non-existent. She was trapped in a bubble of absolute silence, completely unaware that 1,000 pounds of apex predator was skidding across the pavement toward her, its claws clicking like hammers against the stone. Through the monitor, I saw Kodiak's head low, his amber eyes locked on the small, solitary shape in the yellow shirt. I reached for my radio to scream a warning I knew she couldn't hear, watching in helpless horror as the distance between the girl and the bear vanished. The predator's momentum was a terrifying force of nature, his massive shoulders rolling with every powerful stride as he cleared the distance to the fountain. From my vantage point behind the glass, it looked like an execution in motion. Kodiak lunged, his heavy paws striking the pavement with a rhythmic thud that I could almost feel through the soles of my shoes, his breath huffing invisible plumes of white against the humid air. The world seemed to contract into those final few yards between the 1,200-pound beast and the small girl in the blue gown. Just as the bear's shadow fell over her, Zara felt the change in the air or perhaps the heavy, grounding vibration of the stone beneath her feet. She turned her head slowly, the black headphones slipping slightly as she moved. My heart hammered against my ribs, expecting the plaza to be painted red in a matter of seconds. But as Zara's eyes locked onto the towering wall of brown fur and muscle, something impossible happened. She didn't scream. She didn't recoil or collapse in a fit of primal terror. Instead, a look of pure, radiant recognition washed over her face. Her lips parted not in a cry for help, but in a wide, breathless smile, the kind of expression one saves for a long-lost friend. As Kodiak skidded to a halt, his massive claws scraping against the plaza stones and sending up a spray of grit, Zara stepped forward. The movement was so calm, so devoid of fear, that it seemed to stun the bear into a temporary paralysis. With a fluid, practiced grace, Zara raised her hands. She ignored the frantic shouting of the distant guards and the red laser dots beginning to dance across the bear's flank. Her fingers began to move in a swift, rhythmic dance of sign language, a series of halt and peace signals she had practiced in a quiet valley years before. She signed with an intentionality that demanded the predator's full attention, her small hands carving shapes out of the tense, silent air between them. Kodiak's ears flicked forward. The low, aggressive rumble in his chest died away, replaced by a confused huff. He lowered his massive head, his snout twitching as he inhaled her scent, a scent he clearly remembered from a life before steel bars and concrete walls. To the snipers on the roof, it looked like a standoff. To me, it looked like a miracle. The static on my radio exploded into a frantic command from Director O'Connor, his voice distorted by the adrenaline of a man about to make a lethal mistake. Target in sight. Clear shot confirmed. Take him down now. On the flat roof of the gift shop, the tactical response team moved with mechanical precision. I looked up to see the sunlight glinting off the polished barrels of high-powered rifles. Then, the first red laser dot appeared. It was a tiny, blood-colored spark that danced across the pavers before climbing up Kodiak's thick, matted flank. A second dot followed, both of them coming to rest squarely between the bear's massive shoulder blades, the kill zone. Zara was still signing, her movements rhythmic and peaceful, her small body partially obscured by the bear's towering frame. The snipers wouldn't wait for her to move. They were trained to eliminate the threat before a tragedy could happen, unaware that the tragedy would be the shot itself. I didn't think. I moved. I burst through the security hub doors, my boots skidding on the stone as I sprinted into the dead zone. My lungs burned as I threw myself into the gap, standing directly in the line of fire. I spread my arms wide, my back to the bear and my chest facing the gift shop roof, effectively masking the predator's vitals with my own body. "Don't shoot!" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. "Look at him. He's not attacking." I could feel the heat of the red dots now, two burning points of light centered on the fabric of my own uniform. The air in the plaza felt thick, charged with the silent electricity of a standoff that could end in a heartbeat. Behind me, I felt the heavy, warm huff of Kodiak's breath against my neck, but I didn't flinch. I was a human shield, caught in a terrifying silence, betting my life that the men on the roof would see what Zara already knew. The chaos of the plaza faded into the hazy, golden light of the Kashmiri highlands 5 years ago, where the air was thin and smelled of crushed pine needles. Before the zoo, before the cages, there was the valley. Zara was only 6 then, a child navigating a world of vibrations and visual symphonies. Her father had been a ranger at a remote wildlife outpost, and it was on the periphery of their cabin that she had first found him. He had been a tiny, shivering ball of matted chocolate fur huddled beneath the roots of a fallen cedar. His mother had been taken by poachers, a tragedy that left him alone to face the biting mountain winds. Zara had found the cub while wandering the forest edge. His high-pitched, desperate cries fell on her deaf ears, but his trembling body spoke directly to her heart. To her, he wasn't a predator. He was Koda, a name she formed with a specific, rhythmic sequence of hand movements that became his first tether to the world of the living. For months, while her parents worked to stabilize the cub, Zara became his shadow and his savior. She didn't use a voice he couldn't understand. She used the language of the mountains. She taught him to recognize the vibration of her footsteps on the packed earth and the specific patterns of her hands that meant safe, food, and friend. They spent afternoons in the tall grass, a small girl with ribbons in her hair and a growing bear cub who followed her with clumsy, devoted steps. It was during those silent hours that the bond was forged, a deep, cellular recognition that bypassed the need for sound. She had watched him grow from a fragile bundle into a spirited yearling, seeing the same amber spark in his eyes that I saw now in the plaza. Priya surged toward the plaza, her heart a frantic, hammering bird against her ribs as she screamed her daughter's name. The zoo security team held her back, their arms a barricade of khaki and steel, but from her vantage point near the gift shop entrance, she could see the impossible. She saw Marcus standing as a human shield and the snipers taking aim, but her eyes, the eyes of a mother who had raised a child in the silence of the Kashmiri valleys, saw something the armed men were blind to. She watched the way Kodiak's massive body was positioned. He wasn't crouched in a predatory lunge. He was standing broadside, his massive bulk angled toward the retreating, screaming crowd and the frantic guards. He was creating a wall. His focus wasn't on Zara as a meal, but as an anchor. Every time a guard moved too quickly, or a siren let out a fresh burst of sound, the bear's upper lip would twitch in a protective snarl, not directed at the girl, but at the chaos threatening to engulf her. "Wait!" Priya shrieked, her voice finally breaking through the panic of the nearby officers. "Look at his ears! Look at his eyes!" She pointed with a trembling hand at the way the bear's head was lowered, allowing Zara to keep her hands within his line of sight. Priya recognized that specific tilt of the head. It was the same way Koda had looked at Zara when they were children, a silent submission to the only human voice he had ever heard through the language of touch and sign. She realized with a jolt of terrifying clarity that the bear wasn't the intruder. In his mind, he was the guardian. He had scented his old friend in the midst of the mechanical zoo noise and had broken out not to hunt, but to find the one person who made him feel safe. He was shielding Zara from the very people trying to save her. Director O'Connor's voice crackled through my earpiece, no longer just urgent, but bordering on hysterical. "Marcus, get out of there now. You're obstructing a clear shot, and you're putting that child in even more danger. Move her, or we move both of you." I looked over my shoulder at the scene behind me. Zara was still there, her expression a serene island in a sea of chaos. She had reached out, her small, pale hand inches away from Kodiak's massive, scarred muzzle. The bear wasn't snarling. His eyes were half closed, his giant frame vibrating with a low, rhythmic hum that felt like a purr against the soles of my boots. "I can't do that, James," I shouted back, my eyes fixed on the shadows of the snipers on the roof. "If I pull her away now, we break the only tether he has. Look at him. He's not a predator right now. He's a lost animal who finally found home. She is the only reason he hasn't reacted to the sirens or the shouting. He's a 1,200-pound Kodiak, Marcus. It's a matter of physics, not feelings." O'Connor retorted. "If he snaps, she's gone before you can blink. Step aside." "If you shoot," I countered, my voice dropping to a low, fierce whisper that I hoped would reach the men behind the scopes, "you'll hit the only thing keeping this plaza from becoming a slaughterhouse. He's calm because she's calm. You move her, you trigger his fight or flight, and God help us all when a bear that size chooses to fight." I watched the red dots on my chest tremble as the snipers hesitated. I was a lone negotiator in a silent dialogue, standing between a rigid system that saw only a monster and a young girl who saw only a friend. I refused to budge, anchoring myself to the pavement, knowing that if I moved, the silence, and the lives within it, would be shattered forever. The tension in the plaza reached a breaking point, a heavy, suffocating stillness that felt like the moment before a lightning strike. The sirens had finally been cut, leaving behind an eerie silence that was punctured only by the distant, rhythmic whirring of a news drone hovering overhead. On the giant screens in the security hub and on millions of smartphones across the city, the world watched a live feed of the impossible. Zara took a final step forward. Her small frame was completely eclipsed by the bear's shadow, making her look like a porcelain doll standing before a mountain of granite. She didn't look at the rifles on the roof or at me. Her entire universe was centered on the moist, dark nose of the animal in front of her. With a slow, steady grace, she reached out her hand, palm upward, a gesture of absolute vulnerability and trust. Kodiak huffed, a great cloud of breath ruffling Zara's hair, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into her touch. The moment her fingertips made contact with the damp, velvet skin of his muzzle, the bear closed his eyes and let out a long, shuddering sigh that seemed to vibrate through the very pavement. It wasn't an act of submission, it was a homecoming. Above us, the drone dipped lower, capturing the high-definition image of the monster nuzzling into the palm of a deaf girl who was smiling as if they were back in their mountain valley. In that second, the narrative shifted. The red alert banners on news broadcasts were replaced by the words, "The miracle in the plaza." The red laser dots on my chest finally winked out as the snipers lowered their weapons, realized that to fire now would be to shoot at something sacred. The image went viral instantly, a silent testament to a bond that ignored the laws of nature, turning a day of terror into a global symbol of hope. The viral image of the Plaza, the tiny hand against the massive, dark muzzle, acted as a catalyst that the zoo's board of directors could not ignore. Within 48 hours, the public's terror had transformed into an outpouring of advocacy. A global crowdfunding campaign, titled the Silent Valley Project, raised millions in mere days, fueled by a collective realization that Kodiak's escape was actually a desperate search for the only peace he had ever known. The cramped concrete enclosure with its faulty electronic locks and artificial sounds was condemned, not by a safety inspector, but by the court of public opinion. Construction began almost immediately on the outskirts of the city, where the zoo owned a vast tract of untouched woodland. This wasn't to be a cage. It was a sanctuary designed to mimic the Kashmiri highlands Zara and Koda had once shared. The plans replaced iron bars with deep, natural ravines and replaced the hum of machinery with the rustle of real pine trees and the trickle of a mountain stream. Every cent of the donations went into creating a sensory-friendly haven, one where the acoustics were dampened to prevent the auditory stress that had plagued the bear for years. I stood with Director O'Connor on the day the transport crate was finally opened at the new site. The atmosphere was a world away from the frantic red dots and sirens of the Plaza. As the heavy door slid upward, Kodiak didn't charge. He stepped out tentatively, his paws sinking into real soil for the first time in half a decade. He paused, lifting his head to catch the scent of cedar on the wind. Then, from a safe observation deck overlooking the meadow, Zara raised her hand. She didn't have to say a word. She simply signed home, and as the bear turned to look at her, we knew the transition was complete. The prisoner had finally become an inhabitant. The golden hour of the afternoon settled over the sanctuary, casting long, soft shadows across the meadow that now served as Kodiak's kingdom. From my position on the observation deck, the world felt finally, profoundly right. Below, seated on a smooth granite boulder that overlooked a sparkling stream, was Zara. She wasn't wearing her headphones today. She didn't need to block out the world when the world had finally learned to be quiet for her. A few feet away, Kodiak lay in the tall grass, his massive head resting on his paws, his eyes fixed on the girl with an unwavering, peaceful devotion. There was no glass between them now, only the mutual understanding of two souls who had found their way back to one another through a sea of noise and fear. Every few minutes, Zara would move her hands, not to command or to plead, but simply to share the moment. She signed the word for sunset, her fingers mimicking the descent of the sun behind the trees, and Kodiak's ears would twitch in acknowledgement, a silent conversation flowing through the air like a prayer. As I watched them, I realized that the tragedy of the zoo hadn't been the broken lock or the charging beast. It was the arrogance of a world that believed communication required a voice. We had spent years studying Kodiak's biology while missing his spirit, yet a young girl who couldn't hear a single roar had understood him perfectly. Their bond was a living reminder that the most profound truths are often found in the spaces between sounds. In the stillness of a sanctuary, the message was clear. Love doesn't need a megaphone to be heard, and nonviolence doesn't need a script to be understood. As the last of the light faded, Zara leaned back against the stone, and Kodiak let out a long, contented sigh. In that perfect, heavy silence, they proved that when the heart speaks, words are only an intrusion. Love, in its purest form, is the quietest thing in the world, and yet it is the only thing loud enough to change it. This incredible bond between Zara and Kodiak reminds us that compassion is a universal language, one that doesn't require a single spoken word to change the world. Their story is a testament to the fact that even the most fearsome exterior can harbor a heart full of gratitude and memory. If this story touched your heart and gave you chills, please show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. By joining our community, you'll never miss another emotional journey of courage, mystery, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and nature. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story right here on Mr. Brian's Tale.